I'm glad to be here. My name is Nadia Bolz. I'm the founding pastor of House for All Sinners and Saints in Denver, Colorado. It's a Lutheran mission church. One of the things that came out of that, it was interesting. Jason Biasi, I describe as a genius because he spent, I think, 24 hours with us, and I'd never, ever read something so accurate about my church. He really nailed it. And he actually had some insights and said some things in the report and in the article that I'd never thought of before, but I read them and I was like, oh my gosh, he's right. That's totally true. So being part of this has made me think about how we use social media in a way that I'd never thought of it before. And one of the things he mentions in that article is the fact that it took a minute for people to answer questions about how they use social media in my community, because it's like oxygen. They're just so used to it. And I think he said, it's hard to describe it, but if they're deprived of it, they would suffer, right? So it's hard to describe how we use oxygen because we're just so used to it. But I think that's really important because a lot of the people in my community are just native to this culture of social media, so they're not self-conscious about the way that they're engaging with it. It's very natural. And the same goes for our church. We don't have a social media strategy. That seemed like the silliest thing we'd ever heard. So we never thought of it. We just very naturally move through the world in a certain way. And that really involves social media. And so I think that I hope it's not too disappointing to say I don't have any new ideas for you about social media. I don't have any tricks for you. There's nothing I can tell you that if you employ a certain technique or tactic, your dying church will become like House for All Sinners and Saints and all the young adults will show up. I think that when we start as a church thinking like that, we're a bit misguided. If you think about the reformers, they were using new media. It was the Gutenberg press. Now, the use of the Gutenberg press did in no way make them more relevant for the people who they were writing to. It didn't make them naturally have a different cultural location because they were using a new way to get information out. Their message was their message, their writing was their writing, they were who they were. It just magnified that. So I get a little twitchy when I feel like people want to employ social media so that they can seem to be something they're not in the church. And I think that's the way a lot of churches approach it, because there's a certain amount of anxiety right now because the main line isn't doing so hot. So there's, a lot of churches are dying, a lot of churches are dwindling. If you project the age of the congregation out 15 years, there's no congregation left. So I know that there's this anxiety, and so people want to sort of, grasp at things that they think might be able to help that. I'm not sure that this is necessarily the panacea that some people are thinking it's going to be. Now, I'll say just two ways that we do employ social media. One is public and one's private. So at House, we had to switch to we have a secret closed Facebook group. Now, that goes against, it took us a while to get to that place because it goes against everything we're about. We don't have membership at House for All. Literally, when you show up, we say, we don't have membership. Whoever the Spirit brought to be in this room today is the church. We have an unapologetically open table. So it felt really strange that we would begin to have a closed Facebook group. But honestly, the Facebook page for House for All Sinners and Saints became a fan site for the church, which just felt creepy in my parishioners. So I would post something like, hey, what should we do in Advent? And 10 people no one have ever heard of would reply. And none of my parishioners were engaging on that Facebook page because it felt like a fan site. So we made the decision to have a closed invite-only group on Facebook for the people who are really part of that community. And it has been amazing. That page is active several times a day, every day. It's become a center for prayer, actually, in our community. So people bring their prayer requests to that page. We definitely have a praying church. They take praying on each other's behalf very seriously. And so you see a lot of that. Or if, employment's kind of tight, as soon as somebody in the congregation knows that there's a job available somewhere in the city, they post it in our group. So or they'll say, hey, we're going skiing tomorrow. Who wants to carpool up? So, I mean, it's really a center of the community. It's been extraordinary. And I'm asked to speak about my church a lot, and it's important for me to not have two churches, the one I speak about and the one that actually exists. And so I always open it up. I tell my congregation what I've been asked to speak about, and then I ask them to tell me what they want me to say. And so one of the things that they said was that having that really intimate Facebook group was a way for new people to become engaged very quickly in the community. Because if you're just showing up for an hour and a half on Sundays, it's really hard. And people are really good friends in our church. They're pretty tight, and you can see that. And so being in that Facebook group and responding to people's prayer requests or posting things yourself is a way for people to enter into the community that is harder if it's just in person on Sundays. So the other thing that somebody asked that I say is that it's really good for introverts. It's a way for them to really engage people and to that feels more comfortable than walking up and introducing themselves on Sunday. Now, that's not something I would have known had I not asked them what do they want me to say. And then another thing somebody asked me to bring up is a little cranky, which is they didn't like the question of like what's the one thing that you would suggest, because to them it felt like it was like a marketing strategy and what they said was they feel that this is them. They said, we have a pastor who models being vulnerable and transparent to us, and that's what created the vulnerability and transparency on this Facebook page, that I have sort of created that space and said it's okay because I'm that way with them. So he felt like that's a much more valid question, like how are we creating spaces where people can bring the entirety of who they are. So that's the private thing, and it's been really, really a rich thing for us to have that space online. Now, I didn't do anything to get people to engage. They just did it, right? So I don't have a strategy for how to make that work in another context. Now, the public thing. The sermons from our church are available online in audio form and in written form. And thousands of people listen to these every week. So when I say there's no membership, it's like there's all membership. Like there are people who consider themselves in some way part of this community who've never visited before. And they're very much nourished by the word that they hear online. And they connect to it. And I'll give you a story really quickly. How many minutes do I have left? -2.
3 or 4.
3 or 4, okay. So I got an email. This is a New York story. I got an email about 5 weeks ago or so, this woman telling me her story. She's Jewish, but raised atheist, not non-religious Jew. She's an academic. She's finishing her dissertation. She teaches at a very liberal state university in California. And she sent me an email saying that she had never had an experience of God or a religious experience in her entire life and is in no way inclined to really even seek one out. She's from Coney Island, and her family lost everything in Sandy. And every time she turned around, she saw Lutherans helping out, right? Lutheran disaster response. And so she went to her therapist, and she goes, "What's up with Lutherans?" And her therapist said, and this woman is a young queer woman in her 20s. She said, "Well, I know that there's this church in Denver, and you can listen to the sermons online, and they're an open and affirming congregation. So, if you want to know more, check it out. Here's the URL." And so she didn't just go and listen to a couple sermons. She went and listened to all the sermons, and all the way back that she could. And she emailed me, and she said, "I have no way of understanding what's going on inside of me right now, other than the fact that I'm certain that God is moving. And I don't have a reference for what's going on, but I feel absolutely drawn through the gospel to follow Christ. And if I came out, could I please be baptized?" Right? So I sent this, as I do with almost everything, to my leadership group. and said, what do you guys think? And they said, well, we have an unapologetically open table at House for All, so we should also have an open font. And so she came to my catechumenate class that I was teaching on Saturday, and then there was a potluck to welcome her at my house, and she was just completely embraced. And we baptized her on 2 weeks ago on Sunday. So if God's in any way working in a community, I think it's our responsibility to share those stories as broadly as we can. I think the thing about social media, you just never know who's being impacted by what you're putting out there. I don't think we should become self-conscious about it, and then that becomes our identity. That we're the church that all these strangers are getting so much out of, but I don't think that it also makes sense for us to not pay attention to that as well, because we have to be responsible with it. So I guess there's the sort of private way in which we use social media, and there's the public way in which we use social media, both of which are a representation of who we actually are. Those things don't change those things don't define who we are. They just sort of magnify it. So I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.